What happens when one of Hollywood's most intimidating and soft-spoken stars sits down for what should be a routine promotional interview, only to find himself under siege from daytime television's most aggressive host? The legendary Liam Neeson, known for his commanding presence and iconic action roles, walked onto the set expecting to discuss his latest project, but instead found himself facing off against Behar's relentless questioning that pushed the taken star beyond his breaking point. What started as typical Hollywood promotional banter quickly spiraled into a fiery argument that had audience members stunned and production staff desperately trying to regain control. The tension became so explosive that Neeson did something he'd never done before in his decades-long career, something that left millions of viewers absolutely speechless. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this heated confrontation will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about celebrity interviews. You're about to witness one of the most shocking and morally reprehensible moments in daytime television history. Liam Neeson, a man whose quiet dignity and gentle strength have made him one of Hollywood's most respected figures, was about to face something that would test every ounce of his legendary composure. The distinguished actor who has navigated decades of interviews with thoughtful grace, who has carried himself with remarkable dignity through both professional triumphs and personal tragedies, was about to encounter a host who seemed determined to weaponize his deepest pain for entertainment. For over 4 decades, Liam Neeson has been the embodiment of quiet strength and professional excellence. He's handled challenging questions with thoughtful responses, discussed his craft with genuine passion, and maintained his dignity even when discussing the most painful chapters of his life. From his early dramatic roles to his unexpected action hero renaissance, Neeson has always approached his career and his public appearances with the kind of respectful professionalism that has earned him universal admiration. But on this particular morning at the View studio, the legendary actor would face a different kind of challenge entirely. This wasn't going to be about his latest action thriller, his incredible career transformation, or even his approach to filmmaking. This was going to be a calculated assault on the most sacred aspects of his personal life. What you're about to see isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly human decency can be abandoned when someone decides that exploiting personal tragedy makes for compelling television. The man who gave us Schindler's List and Taken, who has shown us both profound drama and unexpected action heroism, was about to reveal a side of himself that even his most devoted fans had never witnessed before. The View studio was about to become the setting for a confrontation that would be remembered as one of the most unnecessarily cruel moments in television history. The morning sunlight filtered through the windows of ABC's Manhattan studios as Liam Neeson arrived with his characteristic quiet dignity and understated presence. The distinguished actor moved through the backstage corridors with that unmistakable grace that had made him a beloved figure in Hollywood, greeting each crew member with genuine warmth and the kind of respectful professionalism that had defined his 4-decade career. "Good morning, everyone," he said in that distinctive Irish accent, his voice carrying the gentle authority that had captivated audiences worldwide. He stopped to shake hands with a young production assistant, asking about her studies with the kind of genuine interest that made everyone feel valued in his presence. His publicist walked alongside him, reviewing the standard promotional talking points about his latest action thriller. "Liam, they're really excited to have you. Just focus on the film, maybe share some insights about your approach to these action roles, and you know how much they respect your perspective." Neeson nodded thoughtfully, his weathered face reflecting the wisdom and depth that had made him one of cinema's most compelling performers. "It's always a pleasure to discuss the work," he replied with that characteristic humility. "These films have given me a chance to explore different aspects of storytelling, even at this stage of my career." The makeup artist worked quietly and efficiently, clearly in awe of the legendary actor sitting in her chair. "Mr. Neeson, it's such an honor. Your films have meant so much to so many people, especially the way you've handled both drama and action with such dignity." "That's very kind of you," he replied with genuine warmth, his eyes reflecting the kind of authentic appreciation that couldn't be manufactured. The studio erupted in respectful, warm applause as Neeson made his entrance. His commanding yet gentle presence immediately elevated the atmosphere as he settled into the guest chair with that quiet authority that commanded respect without demanding it. The hosts beamed with obvious honor at having such a distinguished guest, and everything felt perfectly aligned for another classic Liam Neeson promotional appearance. But Joy Behar sat quietly observing, her expression suggesting she had something far more confrontational planned for Hollywood's gentleman warrior. "So, Liam," Whoopi began with obvious admiration, "tell us about this latest film. It's amazing how you've transformed into this action hero later in your career. What draws you to these roles?" Neeson's weathered face took on that thoughtful expression that had made him one of Hollywood's most compelling interview subjects. He leaned forward slightly, his voice carrying the weight of experience and genuine passion for his craft. "Well, Whoopi, it's been quite an unexpected journey," he said with that distinctive Irish accent that commanded attention. "When I first did Taken, I never imagined it would lead to this whole new chapter. But there's something appealing about playing men who are driven by love and protection. Fathers, husbands, people fighting for what matters most to them." The audience listened with rapt attention, clearly captivated by his eloquent and heartfelt description. His hands moved with measured gestures as he painted a picture of characters driven by deep emotional stakes rather than mere violence. "And working with these casts and directors has been extraordinary," he continued, his voice warming with genuine appreciation. "They understand that even in action films, it's the human story that matters. The physicality serves the emotion, not the other way around." Throughout this thoughtful discussion, Joy Behar had remained conspicuously silent, while the other hosts leaned in with obvious respect, nodding appreciatively at Neeson's insights. Joy sat back with a calculating expression, studying him with an intensity that seemed oddly predatory for such a respectful conversation. Finally, after several minutes of dignified storytelling, Joy shifted forward in her chair. The movement was subtle, but it immediately changed the energy in the room. Neeson paused, his seasoned instincts picking up on the shift, and the other host grew noticeably quieter. "Liam," Joy said, her voice carrying a coolness that cut through the warm atmosphere like a blade, "I have to ask you about something that's been on my mind. This whole action hero transformation at your age, don't you think there's something a little unbelievable about it? I mean, some people are wondering if audiences are supposed to buy into this tough guy persona from someone who's, let's face it, getting up there in years." The studio temperature seemed to drop several degrees, and Neeson's thoughtful expression shifted to something more confused and guarded. Neeson's legendary composure remained intact, but there was a subtle shift in his posture as he processed Joy's pointed question about his age and credibility. His voice, when he responded, carried that measured tone that had served him well through decades of navigating Hollywood's complex landscape. "Joy, I think you might be misunderstanding what these films are about," he replied carefully, his Irish accent lending gravity to his words. "They're not about physical prowess or trying to appear younger than I am. They're about men who are driven by desperation, by love, by the need to protect what they hold dear." Joy sensed she had found her opening and pressed forward with the aggressive instinct of someone who had identified a vulnerable target. Her voice took on a sharper edge as she leaned into what was clearly becoming an interrogation rather than an interview. "But Liam, let's be honest here," she continued, her tone growing more confrontational. "Don't you think this whole action hero thing is really about escapism? About working through your own personal trauma in a very public way? Some people are saying that your Taken success is really just you processing your own grief and loss on screen." The other hosts exchanged deeply uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing that Joy was venturing into territory that went far beyond professional discussion of his work. Sarah attempted a nervous intervention, but Joy's focus remained laser-locked on Neeson. Neeson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his legendary self-control being tested in a way that was clearly unprecedented in his media experience. "You're conflating my personal life with my professional choices," he said, his voice carrying a warning edge that suggested his famous restraint was beginning to fray. The studio audience could feel the tension building as the respectful promotional atmosphere rapidly dissolved into something much more invasive and personal. Joy's predatory smile suggested she was just getting started with her systematic invasion of his private pain. Joy's eyes gleamed with something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction as she prepared to launch her most devastating attack yet. The pretense of discussing Neeson's action career had been completely abandoned, and everyone in the studio could sense that something far more personal and vicious was about to unfold. "Liam, let's talk about what really happened," Joy said, her voice taking on a tone that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Your wife's tragic death, the way you've thrown yourself into these violent action roles afterward, don't you think you're exploiting your own grief? Don't you think you're capitalizing on personal tragedy to build this whole new career phase?" The question hit the studio like a physical blow. The other hosts' faces showed immediate shock, and even the camera operators seemed to freeze. This was the kind of personal attack that crossed every professional boundary, weaponizing Neeson's most profound loss against him in the most public way possible. Neeson's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The thoughtful composure vanished, replaced by something much more intense and protective. His voice, when he spoke, carried a tremor of genuine fury that suggested Joy had just attacked something sacred. "Joy, you're talking about my wife," he said, his voice steady but filled with barely contained rage. "You're suggesting that I've used her death, the most devastating loss of my life, as some kind of marketing strategy. That's not just wrong, it's obscene." But Joy had clearly decided that respect for his grief was irrelevant to good television. She leaned forward even more aggressively, her voice rising with what seemed like manufactured concern. When public figures make career choices that seem directly connected to personal trauma, when they repeatedly play men seeking revenge or fighting for lost love, isn't it fair to ask whether they're processing their pain in a healthy way? Isn't that part of being transparent with your audience? The studio audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing what felt less like journalism and more like a public desecration of sacred grief. What happened next would become one of the most emotionally brutal confrontations in daytime television history. Joy's attack on Neeson's grief and the sacred memory of his wife had pushed Hollywood's gentlest giant past every boundary of human decency, and the protective fury that lay beneath his quiet dignity was about to transform into something far more fierce and uncontrolled. "Joy, what you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's desecration," Neeson fired back, his voice rising with an intensity that shocked everyone in the studio. "You're taking the love of my life, the woman who gave meaning to everything I've ever done, and you're turning her memory into fodder for your television show. That's not analysis. That's cruelty." Joy's face flushed with anger as she shot up from her chair, clearly relishing the explosive confrontation she had successfully orchestrated. "Cruelty? Liam, I'm asking legitimate questions about how public figures process trauma. When your entire career renaissance seems built around themes of loss and revenge, people deserve to understand the connection." Neeson rose to meet her challenge, his commanding presence filling the studio with an authority that was both magnetic and terrifying. "You want to understand? My wife was everything good in this world. Every role I take, every story I tell, is an attempt to honor what she meant to me. But you've twisted that into something ugly." The other hosts were completely paralyzed, afraid to intervene in what had become an all-out war between a television host and a grieving widower. The studio audience watched in horrified fascination as the confrontation escalated beyond anything they had ever witnessed. "Your career renaissance is built on exploiting your own tragedy," Joy shot back, her voice cracking with what seemed like conviction. "And maybe that's not healthy for you or fair to your audiences." The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what would become the most uncomfortable and personally devastating exchange in television history. The silence that followed Joy's devastating comment about exploiting tragedy felt like it stretched on for an eternity. Neeson stood there, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, his legendary composure hanging by the thinnest of threads. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a quiet intensity that made everyone in the studio understand they were witnessing something unprecedented. "Joy, you just crossed a line that reveals the emptiness of your soul," he said, his words cutting through the studio like a sword. "You've taken the most sacred thing in my life, my love for my wife, and you've tried to turn it into something cheap and exploitative because it serves your need for controversy." Joy realized she had pushed too far, but instead of backing down, she made one final, unforgivable attack. "Liam, maybe you should have just retired when she died, instead of turning your grief into a franchise." "Enough!" Neeson's voice exploded through the studio with a force that made everyone recoil in shock. "You heartless, soulless excuse for a human being. How dare you suggest that my wife's death should have ended my life too? How dare you mock the way I've tried to honor her memory?" He began removing his microphone with swift, furious movements, each action a clear statement that this conversation was over. Joy watched in growing panic as she realized her attack had completely destroyed any possibility of civil discourse. "You can't just storm off when someone asks difficult questions," she called out desperately, her voice rising to almost a shriek. Neeson turned to face her one final time, and the look in his eyes was one of complete disgust mixed with profound heartbreak. "I'm not storming off from difficult questions. I'm protecting my wife's memory from your poisonous cynicism." With that, Liam Neeson stomped off the set with righteous fury, leaving Joy standing alone in the wreckage of what had once been a respectful television studio. The silence that engulfed the View studio after Liam Neeson's explosive exit was unlike anything the crew had ever experienced. It was the kind of profound, uncomfortable quiet that follows a moral catastrophe, when everyone present realizes they've just witnessed something that should never have happened. The only sounds were the mechanical hum of cameras still rolling and the horrified whispers of audience members who couldn't believe what had just been done to a grieving widower. Joy stood frozen in place, her face cycling through expressions of defiance, confusion, and something that might have been the dawning realization of what she had just destroyed. When she finally spoke, her voice lacked its earlier aggression, replaced by something that sounded almost desperate. "Well," she said, attempting to regain control of the narrative, "I think that reaction shows exactly why we need to have these conversations about how celebrities process trauma in public." But the other hosts' faces told a completely different story. Whoopi looked genuinely horrified, her expression suggesting she couldn't believe what had just happened to a man she clearly respected. Sarah appeared close to tears, and even Sunny seemed shaken by the unprecedented cruelty they had just witnessed. The studio audience sat in stunned disbelief, many shaking their heads in obvious disgust at what had transpired. Several audience members could be heard whispering, "That was inhuman, and how could she do that?" their voices carrying clearly in the unnaturally quiet studio. The production crew stood frozen, knowing they had just captured something that would be remembered as one of the most morally reprehensible moments in television history. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was the moment when basic human decency was sacrificed for manufactured controversy. What you just witnessed wasn't accountability or legitimate journalism. It was the systematic exploitation of sacred grief, and Liam Neeson's stomp from that studio wasn't just an exit. It was a defense of love itself that will be remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling. And that's how Hollywood's gentleman warrior went from honored guest to defender of sacred love in less than 20 minutes. All because Joy Behar decided that exploiting Liam Neeson's profound grief was more important than basic human decency. Neeson's stomp from that studio wasn't just a walkout. It was a man protecting the memory of his beloved wife from someone who had confused cruelty with journalism. The question is, do you think Joy crossed the ultimate line by weaponizing personal tragedy, or was she asking legitimate questions about celebrity motivations? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe for more shocking moments that expose how far daytime television has fallen. Until next time, remember, some things should remain sacred, even in the age of manufactured controversy.